The air was heavy with damp earth and rotting leaves as Daniel adjusted his pack, glancing at the overgrown trail ahead. The trees loomed high, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became, no birds, no insects, just the eerie rustle of unseen movement in the underbrush. "We should have reached the coordinates by now," Erin muttered, checking her GPS for the third time. "This place isn't even on the maps." "It was a military facility," Marcus said. "Top secret. They erased all records of it. Makes sense it's hard to find." Daniel wasn't so sure. The rumors spoke of experiments gone wrong, of people disappearing without a trace. But those were just stories, right? They pressed on until the undergrowth thinned, revealing something buried beneath layers of moss and thyme, a rusted metal hatch, half concealed beneath tangled roots. "This is it," Marcus breathed, excitement in his voice. He wiped the grime from the surface, revealing a faded warning label. The words were almost illegible, but Daniel could make out one phrase. "Do not open from the outside." A deep unease coiled in his stomach. Maybe we should rethink this. But Erin was already prying at the latch, and with a groan of protesting metal, the hatch swung open, revealing a staircase spiraling into darkness. A heavy, unnatural silence pressed against them, thick and suffocating. One by one, they descended. The last thing Daniel saw before the hatch closed behind them was the forest swaying, as if something unseen was watching. Daniel spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing behind them, just the empty hallway stretching into the dark. Yet the sound of breathing remained, deep and steady, as if something unseen stood inches away, watching. Marcus gripped his flashlight tightly. "This isn't normal. We need to move. Now." No one argued. They hurried down the corridor, the walls seeming to narrow as they went, the ceiling pressing lower. Every door they passed was marked with strange symbols, etched deep into the metal, as if someone had scratched them there with bare hands. Some doors had long, jagged claw marks, as if something had tried to tear its way out. Then, at the end of the hall, they found the control room. Inside, dust-covered monitors lined the walls, displaying static. A massive observation window overlooked another chamber below, a circular, windowless room. The only thing inside was a single chair, bolted to the floor. Shackles dangled from the armrests. And standing beside it was a man. No, not a man. He looked like Marcus. Same face, same stance. But something was wrong. His skin was too smooth, too still, as if stretched over something that didn't quite fit. His head jerked slightly, movements mechanical, his mouth curling into an unnatural smile. Then, as if sensing them, he turned. And even from behind the glass, Daniel felt its gaze pierce through him. Marcus stumbled back, gasping. "What the hell?" The lights flickered. The Marcus thing in the chamber twitched, then stepped forward, moving unnaturally, limbs bending at the wrong angles. Its mouth opened, far too wide, lips peeling back as it let out a whisper. A whisper that echoed through the speakers. "You should not be here." The screen in front of them crackled, the static shifting into an image. Security footage. It showed them. Standing in the control room. Watching the screen. Then, one by one, their reflections turned. Not them. Twisted versions. Smiling. Staring at the camera. Then the screen went black. Behind them, the door clicked shut. And locked. The stairs groaned under their weight as they descended, the air growing colder with every step. The walls, once painted white, were now cracked and discolored, streaked with something dark that had dried long ago. At the bottom, the corridor stretched ahead, lined with doors, their metal frames warped with age. The dim emergency lights overhead flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to shift when no one was looking. "This place is ancient," Erin whispered, running her fingers along the peeling walls. How long has it been abandoned? Marcus shone his flashlight down the hall. Decades, maybe longer. But look at this, he pointed to the floor. Faint footprints in the dust. Someone's been here. Daniel's unease deepened. Then where are they? Silence. They moved forward, their footsteps echoing unnaturally, as if the space was too big, stretching in ways it shouldn't. Daniel swore he heard something, just behind them, a faint, whispering breath. Then Aaron stopped. Wait. Do you hear that? A soft clicking sound, rhythmic and slow, like something tapping against metal. It was coming from one of the doors. The group hesitated, exchanging nervous glances before Marcus reached out and pressed his hand to the cold steel. The clicking stopped. Then, bang! Something slammed into the door from the other side. The force rattled the hinges, a muffled voice barely audible through the thick metal. A voice that sounded like Marcus. "Let me out," it pleaded. "Please, let me out." Marcus stumbled back, his face pale. That's not possible." The voice continued, now desperate. "Please, I don't know how long I've been in here. You have to help me." Daniel stepped forward, trying to steady his breath. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, a whisper that made his blood run cold. "I'm you." A deep, resounding knock echoed from inside the door, and then, nothing. Erin's hands trembled as she reached for her radio. "We need to get out of here." But when she pressed the button, all she got was static. And underneath it, just barely, was the sound of breathing. Right behind them. Panic surged through Daniel as he lunged for the door, yanking at the handle. It didn't budge. The air inside the control room felt heavier, charged with something unseen, something watching. Erin's voice trembled. "What was that thing?" Marcus swallowed hard, eyes locked on the darkened monitor. "It looked like me." "It was you," Daniel muttered. "Or something trying to be." The speakers crackled again. A distorted voice, warping between frequencies. "You should not be here." The lights flickered. The reflection in the observation window did not. Daniel turned, stomach dropping. Their reflections should have vanished with the lights, but they remained, standing against the glass, grinning. Not them. The copies. Their mouths stretched impossibly wide, teeth too white, too perfect. Then, all at once, they moved. Not in sync. Not mirroring. Acting on their own. Erin's reflection tilted its head, but the real Erin remained frozen in place. The false Marcus pressed his hands against the glass, fingers bending too far backward. Daniel's double stood completely still, except for his mouth. It whispered, "Let us in." A sharp noise burst through the speakers, screaming. Hundreds of voices, overlapping, sobbing, pleading. The sound rattled inside Daniel's skull, drilling into his thoughts. Then, a bang. From the hallway. Something was outside. Trying to get in. The banging grew louder, more desperate. Erin covered her ears. What do we do? The only other exit was the security door on the far end. Marcus darted toward it, fingers flying over the rusted keypad. Come on, come on. A final slam shook the control room. The door buckled. Daniel saw the lock begin to give way. Marcus shouted, "Got it." The security door hissed open. They ran. Beyond the door was another passage, the walls lined with glass observation chambers. Inside, something moved. Shapes shifted in the darkness, figures, their features blurred, watching from behind the glass. Daniel caught a glimpse of himself. But the thing in the reflection wasn't quite right. Its fingers were too long. Its eyes, wrong. He forced himself to look away. Ahead, the corridor split. Left or right. The whispering started again. This way. The voice came from both directions. One led deeper into the facility. The other, back toward the unknown. Neither felt safe. Which way? Aaron hissed. The lights overhead flickered. Then, for just a second, Daniel saw them, dozens of copies standing at the end of each hallway, waiting. Smiling. And then they ran. Straight toward them. Daniel barely had time to react before the copies surged forward, their movements unnatural, like marionettes jerked by invisible strings. The group bolted down the right corridor, running past flickering lights and rows of observation chambers filled with shifting shadows. The copies were fast. Their footsteps didn't match their movements, echoing out of sync, like distorted audio skipping over itself. Up ahead, a door. Go! Marcus shouted, slamming his shoulder against it. The rusted metal groaned but didn't budge. Aaron fumbled with the control panel, hands trembling. The copies were almost there. Then, the door hissed open. They stumbled inside, yanking it shut behind them. A heavy clang echoed as the locking mechanism engaged. Silence. Then, scraping. The copies were still out there, dragging their fingers along the metal, whispering. "We see you." Daniel turned. The room was massive, lined with ancient computers and observation monitors. Faded documents littered the floor, detailing Project Echo. Marcus grabbed one. They weren't just studying something. They were trying to replicate it. Aaron scanned the pages, voice hushed. These weren't just experiments. They were creating something that could replace people, perfectly. But they failed. The copies weren't complete. They couldn't survive outside. Daniel felt his stomach drop. So they were locked away. Buried here. The whispering outside grew louder. "We are still here." Then the lights died. And something moved inside the room. A faint glow flickered from a single monitor, casting eerie shadows. Something shifted near the far wall. A figure, half-formed, its shape flickering between human and something else. Then, a voice. Not from the speakers. From right beside them. "Why did you come?" Daniel's breath hitched. He could feel it watching. Marcus shone his flashlight, nothing there. But the air rippled, like heat rising from pavement. "How do we stop it?" Aaron whispered, gripping the document tighter. Marcus scanned the pages. The originals, the real people, were trapped. The copies took their places. "If we don't get out now." The whispering stopped. Then, from behind them. "You won't." Something slammed into Daniel, sending him sprawling. The others screamed. Shapes melted from the shadows, half-formed, flickering between them and something else. Daniel scrambled backward. The door. Aaron was already there, hacking at the controls. Almost. Marcus swung his flashlight, illuminating himself. His own face, grinning back. "Get away from him!" Daniel shouted. Too late. The copy lunged. Marcus didn't even have time to scream. The moment it touched him, his body twisted, collapsed, as if he were being rewritten. His face stretched, fingers snapping into place like a puppet's limbs. Then he stood. But it wasn't him anymore. Daniel grabbed Aaron. "Run!" They sprinted through the corridors, the walls shifting. The facility was collapsing in on itself, doorways changing, exits disappearing. Ahead, the hatch. Still open. Daniel shoved Aaron forward. "Go!" She scrambled up the ladder. Daniel followed, but just as he reached the top, something grabbed his ankle. A hand. His hand. His own face looked up at him from the darkness below, smiling. "You don't belong out there anymore." Daniel kicked free, scrambling into the forest. The sky was a deep, sickly red. The trees didn't look right. Something had changed. Aaron was already running. "Come on." Daniel followed, the facility sealing itself behind them, as if it had never been there. The whispers faded. But deep in the trees, something watched. Something wearing his face. And it smiled.